Alright, starting out learning how to play burn. On the play is a great place to be. This hand, when you're evaluating a burn opening hand, you really need more than one land. If you look at this hand, we have a bunch of things. We have two things that are castable in one land, a third potentially. It's just too risky. Once again, stuck with a one-lander. I think we'll try it on 6, but generally on turn 1, you want to evaluate a hand ideally that has more than one land and then one of your one-drop creatures. But this hand has some high risk, high reward stuff with it, with both Eidolon and Searing Blaze in the hand. So turn 1, opponent did say they are on a brew, so we'll see. Alright, open up on that. We'll fetch a basic mountain here, kind of reduce the damage we're taking a little bit. You always want to get your Eidolons down early, especially if you're not behind on board, just to kind of punish whatever your opponent is doing. Like I said, we don't know what our opponent's doing. It's Castle Garenbrig is generally not something fair. Fanatic of Ronis means our opponent is... We'll attack, see if they block. Seems unlikely for them to block here. Okay, that works. And after blocks, we'll deal with the Ronis. Getting your opponent's mana things off the board is usually a good place to be. Get another Fanatic of Ronis, sure. No Surveil lands in this version, so we'll actually fetch during our upkeep, just to trigger in case we get Searing Blaze again. I'm deliberately fetching basics here to try to keep the amount of damage we're taking from our lands to an absolute minimum. Send it to Animist. When it goes to 6, we'll pass. Don't see... We could get hit with a Primeval Titan here, which would obviously kind of suck. Uvenwald Oddity. So it looks like we're up against some type of mono green devotion list. And then we'll go ahead and Skullcrack our opponent. Go to 8. And then we have the bolt. So our opponent's got some big creatures. When you're evaluating your sideboard choices with burn, the two of the cards that are frequently boarded out the most are Eidolon and Searing Blaze, simply because these cards they're either really good or they're really kind of clunky and bad. Our opponent's going to have some amount of early creatures besides Fanatic of Mogus, most likely, so Searing Blaze might be okay. Eidolon, especially on the draw, a little less so. So if there are any cards I might want to bring in, I think Eidolon might be the card I trim. Opponent might have big idiots, so Deflecting Palm is potentially good. Alpine Moon, if we see Nykthos out of them, Alpine Moon would be a consideration, but I think generally speaking we just want to be as quick as possible. So probably bring in Path to Exiles and Deflecting Palm. These to clear out the big dudes, this to punish the big dudes if they're attacking us. And I think for the purposes, we'll trim 2 Eidolons and 1 Searing Blaze, simply because Blazes and multiples, And this hand is very damaging, but we also have a 1-drop creature. Generally speaking, ideally you want between 2 and 3 lands. 2 is ideal, 3 is okay. This hand does a ton of damage to us. So, but if my opponent doesn't have a 1-drop creature, could be quite good. Alright. So lead on this. Opponent's unlikely to have anything that can interact with us immediately. They'll probably play some type of blocker here. Probably a Fanatic of Ronis. So that seems to be one of the cards their deck's built around. Play a land here. If they choose to block this turn, which I doubt they will. Try to maximize the damage. Okay, Oran Reef. So there are some type of yeah, sure. We really don't care about this one. It's kind of unfortunate for our opponent that they ran into 4, 4, and 4. With Prowess, it's always +1. So we could kill the Fanatic of Ronis. We could suspend Riftbolt and deal them some damage. If I could guarantee kill them here, so this is 4, this is 4, this is 4 +1. We're 1 short of lethal this turn. So I think we suspend Riftbolt, Lava Spike them, trigger Prowess. Go ahead and do this. Just ignore Kiora. And then, unless they gain some life or kill us this turn, then they're just dead here. So, this is when I referred to earlier in the video about Burn being a very much a turn 4 format kind of deck. This is kind of what I meant. Opponent could do some explosive stuff this turn. They'll have access to 5 mana here. Questing Beast into Utopia Sprawl. There's a good chance they're playing Utopia Sprawl. They have Arbor Elf in their deck. Put us to 10, and then we untap and kill them here. Let's go ahead and bolt them. Sequencing is kind of important with Burn. It's just kind of the way it is with Burn sometimes. Alright, taking a look at another game. Guess we'll be on the play. Evaluating this opening hand. Once again, 1-landers. Some people try to keep 1-landers if they're close or you have some choice to them. But this hand, 4 lands you would not keep on 7. On 6, you can put 1 back, and probably put back one of the fetch lands to keep the option of having the ability to crack a canopy land here. If we had one of the Surveil lands in our deck, I would have been more tempted to keep the second fetch land, but as is, it's just better to kind of open on the Painless land. This is most likely the Hollow One decks, with Burning Inquiry possibly. Otherworld Cookbook is not great for the home team. This means they can turn random cards in their deck to into basically free 3 life every turn. We're probably going to get hit by Asmo. And I did screw up the sequencing here. I should have played the Sunbaked Canyon and held the fetch land for Searing Blaze, potentially for dealing with Asmo. I mean, yeah, we have the Sunbaked Canyon here, which might mitigate some of it, but does unfortunately look like put it maybe on mono black of some kind. And they do have quite a bit of life gain in their deck with the Cling to Dust. And okay, they're not mono black. Well, they could still be a mono black variant, but they do have the ability to gain a bunch of life here. So all right, I'm going to play this land out simply because it allows us to sequence better our mana efficiency here. If I didn't draw another like relevantly castable spell here, I probably would have gone ahead and held this land in hand for Searing Blaze so I could deal with potential Asmo. But as is, we're just dealing with an opponent that might gain a bunch of life. Undercity Sewers, not sure if that means they have any type of counter spells in their deck, but it does present the possibility, or they could be like something like Psychic Frog. It's really not easy to tell what exactly they've got going on over there. Another basic Swamp. Could just be random Surveil land to have some utility with things. Yep, Asmoticular, blah blah blah. It's a Crypt of Agademe. That's an interesting one. So land or another burn spell is just lethal. I'm not going to go after the Asmo because our Eidolon's done basically what we wanted it to at this point. Not the worst case scenario for us. So I cracked that to try to find another burn spell or another land, both of which would have been lethal in that spot. Playing on a creature, they could have just simply blocked with the Asmo on one of the creatures and then use the foods to shoot down the other creature. So it does look like they are going to be a mono black base deck simply because of the Crypt of Agademe. Which is definitely a unique angle of attack. I don't think I've ever seen a Crypt of Agademe deck in Modern. I've certainly seen Coffers decks, which is powered up based on the number of swamps, not the number of creatures in your graveyard. So their graveyard synergies make some sense. Unfortunately, the build we're running of Burn doesn't have any like Sanctifier and Vex or Soul God Lanterns or Rest in Pieces to really kind of punish us in post-board configurations. So opponent has to figure out a way probably to gain a little bit of life this turn and deal with our Eidolon which they already have an onboard way to deal with Eidolon with Asmo. This allows you to sacrifice 2 food tokens, target creature deals 6 damage to itself, and then obviously Cling to Dust here means the longer this game goes, the kind of worse it is a little bit. And opponent is be right back, so stop recording until they come back. Alright, they're making their move. Cracking food. They crack the second food. Yep. This is where the deck becomes incredibly difficult to leverage, unfortunately. Once again, land would still be a pretty good draw here. Would get to go Swift Spear, land, Searing Blaze, kill the Asmo, hit our opponent for 4. That is definitely not ideal. Okay, so we're going to have to do a really crappy play here just to get this Asmo. Well, do we even have to get Asmo off the battlefield right now? I still think we can wait another turn or so, but we are getting to the point where this Asmo can potentially take over the game depending on how our opponent leverages it. I mean, we could potentially here attack, suicide one of our creatures into Asmo, and then skewer the critics. I think that's just spewing too many resources right now in a game where if we draw a land or a normal burn spell, this gets much better. But it goes to 6, sure. And that makes their crypts that much better, I suppose. They wouldn't mind finding a Noble Chase Daredevil, which is a card that plays really nicely with their Underworld cookbooks. Yeah, opponent gets a bunch of mana here. Third Agadeem's Awakening, or Signy of Agadeem, Crypt of Agadeem. Siege the Mirror into what? Notably, they didn't fetch another Living End. Interesting brew they've got over there. Okay. Seven Leaf might be a little too hard to overcome at this point. Let's move on to the second game. Normally this would be a matchup like if you had a Sanctifier Invect or a either Sanctifier Invect or Rest in Peace. This matchup would get a lot better post board. I don't even know that we necessarily want to sideboard anything in this matchup. Roiling Vortex is an option. Alpine Moon against Crypt of Agadeem is an option. I think I honestly might want to go like this and go down Eidolon. Maybe even a split on Eidolon and Searing Blaze. This hand is... like, in theory this hand's alright, but it is very clunky. I think we'll try a slightly better hand. This hand's alright. Ideally I would have been looking for a 1-drop creature into some burn spells, but I think this hand's a little bit more mana efficient than the other one could play it a decent game, but it is a little bit more in danger of just being clunky and getting run over. Not that our opponent's deck is particularly fast, but choosing to run the Lava Spike out over the Lightning Bolt simply because the Bolt could potentially deal with an Asmo, which sometimes that's one of the branches as a control player or as a burn player you have to leverage. Is that better than some of your other options? Alright, so here we're going to suspend the Rift Bolt and hold up casting the Lightning Bolt. We're sure we could Boros Charm, but getting that Rift Bolt suspended saves us the most time. And time sensitiveness is one of the things with this deck that's sometimes a bit tricky. Basic Swamp into Asmo. Now we have to make a decision. Are we trying to ignore Asmo, or are we trying to race our opponent? I don't know, as low resources as we are, if we can afford to try to play a control role. I think we have to try to kill our opponent. And immediately draw a 1-drop creature because opponent knows they win a longer game, so we'll just play that roll. Up to 7. Immediately draw another land. And as well as matchup, or as well as our first match went in this video, I think this also shows some of the issues with playing burn overall, which is board presence plus life gain equals very bad for the burn deck. Yep, nope, not blocking, so you can't get in. A little bit more on your living end here. And then they're going to cast Siege the Mirror. In the living end. I also get another Asmo back. Does this thing have lifelink? No, it's just a 3/1. 3/1 in exile, start a player's graveyard. Need to get a little bit lucky here to win. Skullcrack's okay. Alright, and we just lose here. So I hope this video kind of gave you a little bit of idea of how Burn plays as a deck. We weren't playing against any meta decks because I played in a 2-man queue and tournament practice rounds. But basically this kind of gives you an idea of the hands you're looking to keep in, as a Burn player. Generally your hand guidelines are, especially on a 7-card hand, you want to either have two or three lands and a good mix of castable spells. Sometimes you'll mulligan if you have like a bunch of 2-drops in hand, so you only have 2 lands. And you know, your keep of hands has to be a little bit wider as you get down to 6 and 5-card hands. As I mentioned in kind of, you know, what it is about Burn is that Burn is a resource-heavy deck. You need multiple cards to kill your opponent. It's not an A+B combo deck. It does require, you know, 6 burn spells, 7 burn spells to kill your opponent. Sometimes a number of creatures can kind of mess with that a little bit, as sometimes creatures in the right matchups can deal 2, 4 damage, 6 damage in some spots. You know, whether it's Goblin Guy coming down turn 1, your opponent can't answer it for the first couple turns while they're getting set up, or, you know, Eidolon coming down, them having to cast a couple of spells before it dies. It's not unreasonable for you expect your creatures in some matchups to do 4 to 6 damage. But, you know, and then when you're sideboarding, the cards you probably look to the most in traditional Burn is Eidolon and Searing Blaze, mostly because those are the cards that are either seeing 8 and 9 in a matchup, or there are cards that are completely useless, like Searing Blaze against a deck that isn't playing a bunch of creatures, or playing against a bunch of creatures that are like 5, 6, 7, 8 toughness. Searing Blaze certainly loses its effectiveness in that regard. And then, you know, cards like Skullcrack are a little bit more mana inefficient if you're not having some life gain of your opponent's deck. Sometimes cards like Riftbolt and Skewer the Critics can be awkward if your opponent's killing your creatures or taking some of your spells. Sometimes it's harder to trigger the conditions for Skewer the Critics. So sometimes the cards you're looking to trim are kind of your corner case scenario cards, Skullcrack in matchups where there's not life gain, Eidolon in matchups where it's either going to be a detriment to your strategy more than it is your opponent's, or situations where Eidolon's just going to get outclassed, you know, like with a bunch of Tarmogoyfs and Nethergoyfs and those kind of things. And then Searing Blaze in matchups, generally speaking, where your opponent's going to have 4 toughness and higher creatures and it just really doesn't do much, or your opponent's just not playing any creatures like, you know, a traditional blue-white control deck. And then your sideboard configuration largely can be based on the meta you're playing. Burn does have a lot of sideboard options. Very few of them are home runs in a lot of matchups, but, you know, there are things that can help, you know, whether it be artifact destruction, creature removal like Path to Exile, and you know, some graveyard hate cards, if we were playing it, you know, things like Sanctifier and back, Rest in Peace, Surgical Extraction, Soul Guide Lantern, Tormod's Crypt. We have a wide variety of options, and really you have to kind of get to know your meta a little bit when you're playing and building your sideboard. But that's a little bit more of an advanced version. But I just want to kind of give you an idea of how Burn plays out as a deck, how to sequence your turns, etc. So hopefully this has been good for you, especially if you're learning or relearning the modern format with Modern Burn. Once again, if you do like Burn content, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe. Hope to see you for our next video.